time is it now? It's 5 o'clock here on the East Coast. On day 2 of our 2-week-long bookathon, we have sessions until 8 o'clock tonight, the next 3 hours, and then tomorrow starting at 4 Eastern, and then next weekend too. And we can't decide if we picked a really good weekend or a really bad weekend for this bookathon, considering the weather that a lot of the US is getting. So you'll have to let us know if you love the bookathons, if you want to see more. We always love that feedback too. So please do let us know. And any topics that you'd be interested in hearing as well. It's always helpful when we have some suggestions. Something new and different maybe. All right. If you don't know me, my name is Sandy Lowe. I am Bold Strokes Books senior editor. I apologize for my light. The sun went down and the office is not got great light. So I apologize, I'm in shadow. And this panel is called On Tenterhooks, and they are suspense readings. So I hope you are ready to be on the edge of your seat. I'm going to introduce the panelists as they begin their reading. And we are going to start with MJ Williamz. MJ is having some difficulties with their camera. So you're not going to have video for MJ's reading, but you will hear their lovely voice and enjoy their work. MJ is an author of 22 novels, 3 of which are Goldie winners. They grew up on California's Central Coast, which has influenced much of their writing. They love traveling and have been to all but 6 states. They've been to 3 continents and more countries than they can count. Their favorite places have made it into several of their books. MJ lives in Houston with their wife, fellow Bold Strokes Books author Layden Michaels, their 5 cats and 4 dogs. Oh my goodness, that's a zoo. What's that like? 5 cats and 4 dogs.
It's awesome. It's absolutely awesome, but there's always something going on.
Do you have a favorite?
I have Thor, who's my cat who sleeps next to me in bed. He sleeps on the right side of me on the edge of the bed. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Love it. Okay, MJ, take it away.
All right. So I'm reading today from Undiscovered Treasures, which is about Syl Waterston, who is from Fort Collins, Colorado, and she inherits a lighthouse and cottage in Tampa, Florida from her Aunt Marjorie. And Aunt Marjorie is somebody she's never met because her parents never talked about Aunt Marjorie or anything. But when she gets to Tampa, Syl realizes how many people loved Aunt Marjorie and they welcome her. And so now she's meeting with friends of Aunt Marjorie's. Her friends are Martinique, Luna, and Tawny. And they all believe the lighthouse is haunted. Syl does not believe in ghosts. Luna is a strong believer. And they've decided, Syl has agreed to do a seance in the lighthouse. So that's the scene I'm reading to you. Let's do the seance, Tawny said. I've never been to one and I'm like a little kid at Christmas. Don't get your hopes up, Syl said. I'm glad you're keeping an open mind, Tawny, said Luna with a pointed look at Syl. Syl grinned as she said to the group, I understand we need to get ready. What do we need? I'll heat up the soup, said Luna. We have to eat soup? Syl didn't feel like soup on this hot night in Tampa. It's not for us, silly, Luna swatted Syl's arm playfully. It's for Marjorie. We have to have a warm offering for the spirit. And what flavor of soup do you think my aunt would like, said Syl. I picked up her favorite Italian wedding soup from a deli she loved. Syl had no witty comeback. Luna obviously had cared deeply and paid close attention to Aunt Marjorie's tastes. Syl was duly impressed. Martinique, will you open the bottle of Montepulciano? Said Luna. Oh, said Tawny, that was her favorite. They carried the soup and the glass of wine to the lighthouse, then went back to the cottage to get their own drinks. We won't really be able to drink, explained Luna. We'll be holding hands, but if you feel better with your drinks there, bring them. They sipped their drinks while Luna lit the candles. Then Syl turned off the lights and sat with the others. She was holding Luna's and Martinique's hands and felt like that way she would know if Luna tried to pull something. She didn't believe, obviously, but also didn't trust Luna not to try to stage something. If she did, Syl would be ready. Okay, said Luna, it's time to read the words in front of you. I can't read in the dark, said Syl. We've been practicing. Just do your best from memory. Luna and Martinique said, Our beloved Marjorie, we bring you gifts from life into death. Commune with us, Marjorie, and move among us. They sat silently for what seemed an eternity. Finally, Syl grabbed her beer. She's not here. She omitted the told you so, but it was implied. Don't break the chain, said Luna. Let's try again. Syl set her beer down and grabbed hands again. The group repeated the calling to Marjorie to join them. Syl was about to grab her beer again when the lights came on and went off again. What the hell was that? Are you Marjorie? Said Luna. Can they talk? Said Syl. Knock once on the table if you're Marjorie, twice if you're not. Syl looked at each of them to make sure no one tried anything funny. Someone knocked twice. Are you the ghost that haunts are you the ghost that haunts the lighthouse? One knock. Syl felt the goosebumps rising on her arms. This was trippy. She had to admit it wasn't at all what she expected. We brought you food and wine, said Luna. The wine glass sailed across the entryway and shattered against the wall. Would you like something to drink? Said Luna. One knock. The women all looked at each other, obviously as unsure how to proceed as Syl was. While Syl sat there, her beer bottle floated on the air to her right. When it came back to rest, it was empty. Shit, she whispered. Are you friendly? Said Tawny. One knock. Are you the one who keeps messing with my things? Said Syl. One knock. Syl glanced over at Luna, who grinned and winked at her. This was crazy. How could it be happening? She was about to break the circle when Martinique finally spoke. Do you know Marjorie? One knock. Is she at peace? Luna said. One knock. Thank you for joining us. You can go in peace, said Luna. Two knocks. You don't want this to end? What if we take a break and come back in a few? One knock. Okay, then, we'll be back. Let's break the circle now. Syl flipped the lights on and hurried to the cottage. So they all meet back in the cottage and they're kind of talking about what happened. So Luna says, seriously, Syl, how are you? Syl looked into the deep pools of brown that were Luna's eyes. There was no hint of gloating or amusement. She really wanted to know how Syl was. I'm shaken to my core. I don't know what the hell happened in there, but it was a hell of a lot more than I expected. I thought we'd sit there until you guys got bored and then we'd come back here and drink. That's most definitely not what happened. I want to know more about her, said Tawny. What makes you think it's female, said Syl. Tawny shrugged. I don't know, just a feeling I got. I'd like to know more too, said Luna, but I want to make sure Syl's okay, and Martinique for that matter. Look, Syl said, something was in the lighthouse. We all have to agree with that. But if it's capable of shattering wine glasses and drinking beer, what else is it capable of? How safe are we, really? I agree with Syl, said Martinique. I'm not convinced we won't be in danger if we go back. I'm afraid we will be if we don't, said Luna. Maybe not all of us, but Syl potentially. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Awesome. Wow. Well, that is certainly a much more successful seance than I have ever experienced. I think I'm more in the, sitting around with a drink camp. So that's awesome. Thank you so much, MJ. Next up, we have Kelly Wacker.
Oh, did you want to do my bio first?
Oh, yes, that's a good idea. Right here.
It's all good.
Okay, Kelly Wacker. Kelly Wacker is an art historian, professor, naturalist, and writer. Born and raised in the West, she resides in Alabama, where she is inspired by living in one of the most ecologically diverse places in America. I did not know that. She has published 3 works of fiction, Holding Their Place, a historical romance set in France during World War I, Aspen in Moonlight, a paranormal romance set in the Colorado Rocky Mountains, and The Fall Line, a blend of romance, paranormal, and eco-fiction. Art, animals, and nature figure prominently in all her stories. There you go, you guys. That is Kelly Wacker, and she is going to tell you about her book and start her reading when she's ready.
Great. I'm going to be reading from The Fall Line. And The Fall Line is genre subversive. It's eco-fiction, romance, thriller, and a ghost story, except the ghost is not the villain. The main character, Jordan, is an artist naturalist visiting a college town in Alabama to make paintings of an endangered lily that grows in the river, which is it's a real river and a real lily. She falls in love with an English professor, becomes friends with a long dead gin drinking flapper, gets into a complicated relationship with a wealthy landowning family, and finds herself in danger when the river is threatened. In this scene that I'm going to read for you, Jordan has been painting by the river all day at a location that she's been given access to by the wealthy Palmer family, and a severe storm is approaching. This is a pivotal point in the story where it begins to shift from light and fun to dark and serious. Jordan glanced at her watch. She had time to take a break and stretch her cramped muscles from sitting on a rock painting all day. After an uphill trek to the Palmer family cabin, she stowed her art materials in her Toyota 4Runner, refilled her water bottle from an outside spigot, and followed a well-worn trail leading into the woods. After a half hour, she entered into a clearing planted with corn and cowpeas. It must have been a deer plot intended to fatten them up during the summer so a hunter's bullet could take them down in the fall. She studied the deep green vegetation, looking for meandering lines indicating where deer had crossed. Finding one, she followed it. It was a game she played while hiking alone, following a trace, trying to think like an animal. Where did the trail lead? What tasty foods might be found? Where was the best spot to scratch one's rump or antlers on the rough bark of a tree? And what was the best direction to run if a predator threatened? Midway across the plot, the breeze shifted, carrying strange sounds like distressed animals, angry or in pain. Jordan cringed. The hairs on her arm rose and a shiver crept up her back. She was rarely afraid of the woods, but the eerie sounds spooked her. Retreating to the cabin, something flashed through the foliage as she approached. Sunlight reflecting off a big red pickup truck. First alarmed by the unsettling cries, she now felt a different kind of vulnerability, that of a woman alone. She changed the direction of her approach to the cabin and walked as quietly as she could manage through the undergrowth. She'd learned the skills from years of watching wildlife. Move slowly, watch where you put your feet, avoid stepping on branches. When closer, Jordan recognized the tinted windows, oversized off-road tires, and light bars as the truck belonging to the wealthy Baron Palmer. He owned the cabin, and inexplicably, he hadn't wanted Jordan to use it, but he'd given in to the demands of his wife, Tammy. Jordan paused behind a big pine, watching quietly. Baron was leaning on the porch rail, smoking a cigarette with his back to her. The pines began to whisper and creak in the stiffening breeze. She lifted her nose like a deer, collecting the odors. Standing downwind, she detected an intermingled scent of tobacco and musk. He crushed the cigarette on the underside of the railing, gazing toward the river. He seemed to be waiting for her. Jordan emerged quickly from the woods and cheerfully called his name. He flinched and turned, startled. "I'm sorry," she said. "Did I scare you?" "No, of course not," Baron said. "Weather's about to turn bad, you know." Jordan smiled. "Well, fortunately, I've done a lot of work here in the past few days." "My wife will be glad to hear that," he said. "She's been talking non-stop about your paintings." "I can't thank you enough for your generosity in letting me work here," Jordan said. "I didn't have anything to do with it. You can thank my wife for that." He spoke slowly, as if to a child. "You should be careful out here, all alone. It's not safe." Jordan nodded. I just heard some strange sounds out here, like animals in distress." Baron frowned. His expression clouded. He stroked 2 fingers along the side of his chin as if processing a thought. "Could be feral hogs. They're out here in the deep woods, and they get big, like 250 pounds. It's spring and a mean mama protecting her babies? That is not something I'd want to contend with." His lips twisted into a smile. "They have big appetites and will eat about anything." He paused, looking her up and down slowly, seeming to enjoy her discomfort, including a skinny little thing like you. A cold shiver ran up her spine. Baron chuckled. "Leaving soon?" "Sunset," Jordan said. It was a half-truth. She'd planned to stay until nightfall. "Well, enjoy it, but don't you get caught here after dark," he said. "Thanks for the warning." Jordan recalled the bone-chilling squeals she'd heard over the hill in the deep woods. What brings you out here? Barron smiled, revealing his unnaturally white teeth. I was in the neighborhood, checking fences, so to speak. Thought I'd come check on you. He walked down the steps, pausing to clap her on the shoulder with a meaty hand. I'll let my wife know you're all right. He pointed his index finger at her as he passed. If you want to stay that way, stay close to the river and keep out of the woods. And as you would guess, Jordan goes into the woods in the dark.
Of course, of course. I always love a good warning. There's nothing that says suspense like an ominous warning. So
Don't do that thing.
right. Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much, Kelly. Next up, we have Sheri Lewis Wohl. Sheri Lewis Wohl lives in Northeast Washington State, where she has yet to actually encounter a vampire, werewolf, or a ghost. Aw. But continues to look for them when darkness falls and the full moon rises. A recently retired fed and human remains. Oh, sorry, I should have read this first. Let me start again. A recently retired fed and human remains detection canine handler, Sheri now focuses on writing her stories of dark, dangerous, and delectable characters, as well as working toward her goal of running half marathons in all 50 states. Holy moly, is there anything you can't do?
Well, I didn't say I do them well,
But
but I start and I finish. So there we go.
All right, I believe it. Tell us a little bit about your book, and you can start reading whenever you're ready.
So what I'm reading for you today is from the latest release, which is Buried Secrets. And this is the story of a former U.S. probation officer. Her name is Tuesday, and she was shot in the line of duty. And so now she's in Hunters, Washington, with her search dog Tripper to recover. Also in Hunters is former cop and now private investigator Addie, who's there because she's looking for her brother who disappeared 20 years ago. One wants peace, one wants answers, and neither of them is prepared for the buried secrets they uncover together that may very well destroy them both. This is when Addie and Tuesday first come face to face. Addie walked along the country road and breathed in the clear, fresh air. Pretty nice here with a varied landscape that fascinated a woman who hailed from the Midwest. She liked that she could look up and see the mountains. Pretty awesome. Except for the part about her brother disappearing here. More likely than not, he died nearby. She didn't want to be fatalistic, but couldn't help it. Despite what law enforcement said, Anthony hadn't taken off for a new life. The authorities were wrong about him. He didn't run away, and he certainly didn't have anything to start over from. Leaving the road, Addie hiked into the trees. Anthony, talk to me, she whispered as she moved deeper into the trees, her fingers tingling. I feel you, and I need you to help me. The wind picked up and the air suddenly grew cool. Overhead, dark clouds blotted out the blue sky and sunshine. A storm brewed. She could smell it and loved it. Raindrops kissed her skin, cool and wet, and she smiled. Her weather app had showed a day clear and mild. Are you here? In her mind, the wetness falling on her cheeks was directly from Anthony as he reached out to her. Only he would know that through the rain would be the best way to touch her. She caught it in her palm. I can't do this without you anymore. All of a sudden, the years weighed on her, the loneliness crushing. You were the only one who truly loved me. And when you left, the rug got pulled out from under me, you know? Hot tears pricked at the back of her eyes, falling down her cheeks to mix with the cool raindrops. The first time in ages she'd given in to emotion. What did that say? She edged ever closer to the truth? Oh, how she hoped so. Wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand, she continued to walk through the ever-thickening trees. The rain passing. Message delivered, message received. She touched one of the pines she started to pass by. Its trunk bowed toward the ground as though the wind bent it, but couldn't break it. As her fingertips made contact with the rough bark and the lacy green filament of the wolf moss, everything went dark. What in the hell? Tuesday raced after Tripper, who'd just taken off running like a wild man. For him to take initiative like that, he had a good reason. Thankfully, she didn't have to run long to catch up with him. The pounding of her feet against the hard earth traveling into her shoulder like bolts of lightning. A relief when it stopped. Not so thankfully, she found Tripper next to an unconscious woman lying prone on the pine needle strewn ground. She moved on instinct, dropping down next to the woman. She first tapped on her shoulder. Hello, hello, can you hear me? I'm Tuesday and I'm here to help you. Nothing, not even a twitch. Next, she checked her pulse, strong and steady. Tuesday rocked back on her feet and tried to think through hours and hours of first responder training. Then the woman moaned. Her eyelids fluttered, and then eyes the color of dark chocolate stared up at her. Are you okay? How can I help? What happened? What's your name? Tuesday couldn't help it. Even after all her training, the stress of finding a woman out cold on the ground had her babbling. Oh, real impressive. The woman blinked several times as if she worked to focus. It's you. Her voice came out as a whisper. You're here. What? She'd never seen her before. I can't believe it's you. It's you. She blinked a few more times. Well, they were getting nowhere fast. Maybe she'd hit her head hard when she'd fallen. Yeah, you said that already. What exactly do you mean about me? We've never met. She'd remembered if they'd have crossed paths. Her dark eyes held Tuesday's gaze. I've seen you in my dreams.
Lots of good ending lines this time. I like that one too. Very kind of suspenseful, but also a little bit spooky, I feel like. Nice job. Thanks, Sheri.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Bailey Bridgewater.
Hello, hello from very windy Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Oh, for sure. It's been insane weather here in the US. I feel like no matter where you are,
Yep.
it's for sure. Okay. Bailey travels around the US and Canada, hiking but not today, and writing grants for nonprofits. Come Find Me in the Midnight Sun is her first novel, and its sequel is due out in June. So tell us about Come Find Me in the Midnight Sun.
So Come Find Me in the Midnight Sun is a crime. It's a missing persons crime based in Alaska around the Seward area. So if you're familiar, you can picture that. And so what we have going on here in this scene, new state trooper Louisa Leinbach's mental health is starting to suffer as a result of trying to find 3 missing men in the Alaskan wilderness. Feeling hopeless and lost, she starts driving without aim in a snowstorm, which if you know Alaska, you know was a really bad idea. And so for your reference, the tank is a vehicle and Tails is a dog. The sun tries to rise somewhere, but gray clouds force it back into an inept position. The snow blows toward me in a hypnotic funnel. I lean forward in the seat, squinting even with the wipers on high, but I look away briefly every so often so I don't go into a trance. Halfway there, I realize I'm going to the airstrip. The spot where Brandon ran his truck into the bank is hard to identify. I pass it and recognize after half a mile that I've gone too far. I park where he parked, where his footsteps marked the snow, which is much deeper now. Somehow, I clamber up the bank the same way he did, the snow up past my knees. It's a brand new landscape. The trees are ominous, towering as if they've grown centuries in a week or so since we searched for Brandon. The ground is a blank slate, entire boulders invisible. There's no chance of finding anything in this, but its newness has a strange allure. I keep moving toward the tree line. I don't know how long it takes to reach the pines because the light doesn't change through the snow. It would be impossible to pick out the long landing strip without its obvious lack of underbrush and trees. It's a sheer expanse of shimmering, crystallized snow for hundreds of feet in front of me. There's nothing here, and I don't know what I expected. I kick at the powder, which flies up and showers down, settling into place. It doesn't mind my disturbance at all. I'm on my knees, digging with my gloved hands into the deep snow, which has been gusted into mounds by the wind. As I dig, it collapses onto my hands into the hole and covers my progress. I grunt and scream at it, flinging it to the side until I can see the yellow markings of the runway. They don't tell me a goddamn thing. There's no blood, no berries, no body, no Brandon I can present to Marley, frozen but otherwise looking exactly like the man who walked out of her house so recently. I move forward a couple feet and dig again like a wild animal. Wild animals may be nearby. I don't care. I dig and move forward. I dig down to the paint and move forward again, digging. I'm near the end of the runway. My legs are weak from walking through waist-high snow. There's nothing here, and the tiny frozen flakes come so fast. I squint and it still gets in my eyes. I don't care. I dig, but there's nothing. No blood, no berries, no Brandon. My arms hurt and my fingers are so numb. I can't feel them now. The snow won't move anymore. I need to take a break. I settle back onto my heels and the snow stains the seat of my pants. My whole lower body is cold. The snow spins, the clouds spin, the trees spin. People and animals come in and out of my view. Brandon moving across the snow. Kyle, purple and poisoned. Lee with half of a head. Bears and moose and eagles. I close my eyes. When I open them again, the snowfall is slower. I can barely see the sun overhead. My body's numb. Everything is still and solid, as if I could walk across the 2 feet of snow and not make a dent. Why am I here? I try to stand, but I can't feel my legs. I place my gloved palms flat on the snow and try to push up, but my arms sink. I push. I stand, teetering. I move in slow motion. I see the tree line below me, but it seems forever away. What did I think I would find here? It makes no sense now. My new goal is the tree line. There's nothing in my lungs, in my stomach, in my muscles. I'm moving a ghost. Much later, I'm at the pines. My sweat freezes in place. There's the road, the tank. I can't feel my fingers, so I track their progress into my pockets. If there's metal there, it's the same temperature as my limbs. The idea of being stuck here overtakes my breath. I panic. My throat's closing. I can't be here. I stop, close my eyes, and breathe in and out. Deep breaths. Keep trying. I feel again. The sharp end of a key pokes my finger. I drop them 3 times, then hold them in both hands. I manage to unlock and then fall into the tank. Somehow, I arrive at the hotel. I don't remember the drive. I spill onto the pavement. When I get to my door, it's bewildering. I can't open it. I can't remember how to open the door. I stare at it, then let my head drop against it. There's whining on the other side, but I can't get details. And I'll stop there.
Oh, well, I'm so glad she lives. I was all prepared to be mad at you. Just, I mean, there's tenterhooks and then there's tenterhooks, So thank you for not ending it before she got into the tank. I really appreciate that as a
Thought
reader.
about it, honestly.
Good choice. Thanks, Bailey. Last but certainly not least, we have Mary Burns.
Hi there.
Hello. Mary lives in New York City with her wife of 20 plus years. Cold Case Heat is a murder mystery based on an event in her life. It is her 3rd novel with Bold Strokes Books. She hopes her books transport you to places you've never been, even if really should have read these. Even if they're lands of emotional reality you didn't count on visiting. I like that. Those are the kinds of trips she likes best as a reader. Awesome. Take it away, Mary.
Let's see. Sydney Hansen's best friend was murdered 40 years ago. She received a threatening note then, and now, 40 years later, she receives another, and she's really thrown off for a loop. At the same time, Wyatt Reed's grandson, Wyatt Reed's son, is cleaning out his grandfather's house and comes across a notebook that his grandfather kept about all the particulars of the murder, and he was unaware that his father was murdered. He gets on a plane and he flies across the country to see Sid and confront her about this and find out, and that sends her on an unexpected trip to someone she knew was involved with the murder. This is at the very beginning of the book. Sydney Hansen walked across the lobby that was carpeted in a rich Williamsburg blue. Her chest was thrumming with panic as she passed a rosewood Art Deco table with ebony inlay, the brilliant era cut glass vase on it holding bright yellow winter jasmine and broad-leafed greens. Numbers based on the lobby decor alone clicked through her brain, a habit of years of accountant's training which had taught her to measure and weigh the value of everything, from stock offerings to new office furniture to human lives. Shutting it down, she rapped on the door of room 105 and opened it. The room was dark, all the curtains closed. Sid needed a moment to adjust. Then she saw him in the wingback chair. Little about him seemed to have changed, except that the curly puffs of dark hair had gone white. He still bore that peculiar tilt of the head. Those big, square, black-framed glasses he'd long favored were present. The way they magnified his dark eyes had always made them seem like two giant TV cameras following her around. She opened the curtains. The radio played his beloved opera music at a low volume. Sid turned it off as he blinked up at her, fighting the sunlight that filled the room. It revealed that he was an old man and frail, a fragile, lanky doll tucked beneath the plaid wool blanket that bound his legs. Those long legs, that tall frame. Once upon a time, he'd menaced her with his size. She shook a little at the memory as she looked into the eyes that had pinned her so coldly back then. Now they were confused, roomy. She sat on a beige button chair and regarded him. A bit of spittle oozed out the corner of his mouth. "You don't know who I am, do you?" His gaze was blank. "They say our eyes never change. Neither does our voice." He searched her face. "My hair may be white now, but 40 years ago it was blonde." Recognition dawned in his eyes. "And I worked at the Academy of the Divine Heart." Sid watched fear creep across his face. "That's right. Wyatt Reed's junior accountant, Sydney Hansen." His hands moved beneath the blanket. "I haven't forgotten any of it, and neither have you." He opened and closed his mouth, the fish out of water, no sound coming out. "You made my life a living hell after Wyatt's death. You terrified me with your veiled threat, made me feel you'd always be watching me, that you might kill his son, Drew, or me." The old man strained to hear her. "I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I thought I might go mad. I had no one to talk to but Marie and Nicholas, and Marie finally left me because I couldn't function. Nicholas committed suicide a year later, but you knew that, didn't you?" He slumped in his chair, his face draining of color. "I didn't go mad. I just lived, quietly. But now I'm angry, because last November Wyatt's father died. Complications from COVID. You remember Joe, don't you? He certainly remembered you all these years. The loss of a son and the people involved in that loss are not something you forget." The old man raised his eyes to her imploringly. "I kept in touch with Joe." She leaned forward. "I went to Nebraska to see Drew quite often, and he came to New York every summer like he did when Wyatt was alive, for those summers at the house on Fire Island. Wyatt gave it to me for just that purpose. But you knew all that too, because it was in his will that you and his attorney tried unsuccessfully to change." He closed his eyes for a moment. "I kept looking over my shoulder for you, but you never came. You were confident that you'd gotten away with it, weren't you?" The old man blinked and his mouth opened again. "You know what? You did. And your threat, it stayed with me. So did Joe's advice not to go to the police about you. We didn't dare challenge that you might hurt Drew. But Drew grew up, and he found out about you. That's why I'm here. We never told him that Wyatt was murdered, but he came across a notebook Joe kept all through the police investigation, such as it was." Sid looked out at the sound. "Joe never got over Wyatt's death, you know." Her voice softened. Joe had been more of a father to her than her own cold Nordic parent, and she missed him terribly. One of the old man's hands crept above the blanket, coming to rest on the arm of the chair, and gripped the carved wooden handle. "Drew confronted me with that notebook, and his anger at finding out his father was murdered brought everything up again. The loss, the pain, all of it. How could I tell him someone had threatened him through me so that I wouldn't talk? I should have been smart enough to know you didn't have anything to back up your threat. You were never anything more than a paper tiger." Sid stood and began pacing. I was too young to see that, though. She wanted to sit still and keep him in her crosshairs, but her anger was boiling over and she refused to let him see that. There's no one left in your life, is there? And you're on death's doorstep. She stopped in front of him. You should have succumbed to COVID, you bastard, not Joe. For a second, he cringed, and then he looked up at her as if he knew he shouldn't take his eyes off her. So I'm finally going to do what I think Wyatt was about to do all those years ago. I'm going to the police with every last shred of evidence I have, so you can't threaten me or anyone else I love ever again. I'm going to see to it that you're ruined before you die, that all of this, she gestured around the little apartment and out the big picture window to the sunsplash sound, is gone, that you have nothing left when they lower you into the ground, not even your sterling reputation. And we both know how tarnished that should be. Sid wanted to feel bad for making a 95-year-old man cry. He'd been the root of so many of her tears 40 years ago that she couldn't. She handed him a tissue so he could catch the snot running out of his nose. I understand no one visits you here. You might as well be dead already, but I'll bury you before you are. Sid leaned down, her hands on either arm of the chair, her face inches from his, and you can take that to the bank. His little mewling sounds stirred something deep within her, and for a moment it was herself she heard as she lay in Marie's arms after finding Wyatt dead in his apartment that morning, blood everywhere, wondering who could possibly want to harm him so. And then the memory faded, taking Marie with it. It always ended that way, Marie gone from her life. Sid picked up her purse and turned on her heel.
Wow, talk about a backstory. That's awesome. Thank you so much. I think it's rare that we get those opportunities to confront the bad guys. So that's a great scene. Thank you, Mary. You
Thanks.
can check out all these books in the chat roll. I posted the links if you would like to take a look at them. If everyone can jump back on. I have a few questions for our panelists, but if you have a question, please do pop it in the Q&A, and I will be happy to ask them. Make sure you make it really hard so they have to think. No, okay. Don't make it really hard. It's getting late. It's the weekend, right? MJ, are you with us?
I'm here.
Okay, awesome. Just checking. So let's start with you, MJ. My first question is, can you share a specific technique or strategy that you used in this book to create suspense? Like when you're at that point where you're like, okay, it's time to create suspense. We need some stakes here. What's a technique that you use to do that?
Wow. A technique. I really played on my character's weaknesses and their fear, and I figured if I could bring a ghost into it and really freak her out, that would be great. And so I just kind of play on my character's fear when I develop the suspense.
Yeah, for sure. And I love in your reading how you had one knock, right? And it was just this very like staccato sort of sentence, very short, that was repeated over and over. And I felt, in my body that was really amping up the suspense too. So awesome job. Sheri, how about you? A technique that you use to create suspense?
Well, there's always murder. That's good. But also, I think I'm in this a little bit. There's a bit of the disbelief because you never want to believe that people or people that are close to you are capable of being evil. And it's a bit jarring. And if you've ever been in that position, which I have actually been in that position when someone close to me turns out to be true evil, and you don't want to believe it. So to me, I kind of fall back on that and use that a little bit to drop it up, because I think your readers are starting to see where it is, but your character's like, no. I'd be able to see that if it was there. And the reality is we don't always see it when it's there.
Yeah. I like that technique of giving the reader a little more information than the character has. So then the reader has that sense of dread and, of what's to come. I like that. Bailey, how about you? A technique that you use?
Yeah, so I guess my biggest one, I'm not sure this is healthy, by the way, but I'm a person with anxiety. I have pretty severe anxiety myself. So I write scenes that I want to be suspenseful when I'm having anxiety, because I find that my sentences become shorter and the writing becomes kind of tighter and more on edge. It's a way to kind of use that to benefit the story when I'm writing.
That's so interesting. Really, really interesting. It's very cool. Kelly, how about you? A technique that you use?
I think about, I'm not sure if this classifies as a technique or not, but I think about, it might be something that kind of comes into play in the, you know, as you've kind of knocked out that first draft and you're refining it, but really thinking about the flow, you know, of sometimes the larger arc, but also the, you know, of a particular scene. So for example, the reading that I gave, it really is that kind of pivot point where a lot of nice things have been happening, you know, and so and my expectation is the reader gets, you know, sort of lulled into that and things,
Yeah.
you know, are good. And then there's this shift, you know, and so suddenly it's kind of serious and people aren't quite sure, you know, sort of like Sheri, as you said about, you know, people you think are good turn out to be bad, you know, and that can, and the thunderstorm is that, you know, I mean, it literally goes from light filled to dark filled in a literal way, but that becomes figurative too. So I
Yeah.
think thinking about the flow and the setting and certainly like choice of language, you know, the words that you use or the sounds that you evoke affect that too.
Yeah, I agree. Your reading was very ominous. That's the word that sort of came to mind for me as you were reading. I think because you start off, you know, in a much lighter place, and then it does get darker. You get that foreboding sense.
Like the storm is coming, sort of
yeah,
like the weather right now everywhere.
Picked a good night for it. Mary, how about you? What's a technique you use to create suspense?
I think probably because there were enough people in the book who could possibly have committed that murder 40 years ago. I throw out breadcrumbs that lead the detectives in the direction of all of them, including Sid herself. So you're guessing up until the very end. At
Yeah,
least I hope you are.
yeah, I like that. Little clues, little red herrings. Keep them guessing. Awesome. All right. Are there certain traits or qualities that you find particularly effective in creating suspense through characters? So what are some character traits or qualities that are effective when creating suspense? I can see that CJ did not send you these questions in advance, which is always fun. Anyone want to jump in?
Well, I can jump in. I can say that Sid will sometimes pull back and move away from Gail, the detective, when things get a little rough and she maybe has ideas that she's not sure she should or wants to share. And that puts tension between her and the detective. And of course, there's a romance story going on, very slow burn romance between her and the detective.
Yeah.
But Sid has a tendency to pull back, which Gail figures out pretty early on.
Yeah, I think that's a very common trait in romances particularly, you know, but can also work in mystery as well. That kind of emotional push-pull that happens. Sheri, how about you? What's a character trait that's useful when creating suspense?
I kind of like what she just said about that sort of pulling away, because you can have the characters like step back. And again, for me anyway, because I think my readers know some of the backstory that my main characters don't. So as they step back and think, okay, I'm going to look over here, where your reader's going, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. You need to, no, keep there. So it's that pulling back before you come back in again. And so, and I think we tend to do that, especially like I was saying earlier, when you don't want to believe, when it's close to you and you don't want to believe, you will move back and look for a different explanation when it was maybe right in front of you all along. And then you finally have to come back in and see it for what it is.
Yeah, you have to face the truth.
You have to face the truth. Yeah.
For sure. MJ, how about you? What's a character trait that you find effective in creating suspense?
I don't know. I think cockiness
Mm,
is a trait that somebody is um so intrinsically believes the opposite of what is happening, and they're really cocky about it, and then to bring them down by reality, and this is truly happening, you got to deal with it. I think that works for me.
yeah, that's a great one. And I think sometimes that can be, the voice of disbelief, right? Which might be the voice of the reader, saying all the things that the reader, might be thinking in the moment, and then they get to experience that together. That's awesome. Kelly, how about you? Character trait.
I think this might be kind of similar to some of the other things that we've talked about here, but it's kind of in some ways one or the other, like hesitancy or obliviousness. And then it's thinking about the reader, so if a character is hesitant, the reader might be thinking, oh, you should do that, or you shouldn't do that, or you want them to propel forward, or whatever the situation is. But also a character who's oblivious, the reader, especially if a reader is attached to that character, they might be like, oh, don't go into the woods at night, after that, interaction. And so I think thinking about the reader and how the reader is caught up in the story is important too.
Yeah, that's a great point. Bailey, how about you? Character trait to create suspense.
Yeah, I think for Louisa, it's probably her lone wolfishness. Not sure what. So she has social anxiety and general anxiety, and so her inclination when she's stressed is to want to be alone. And that's great for creating suspense because she's gonna get herself into these situations, especially in Alaska, that she shouldn't be in by herself. And so she's going to go off into the middle of the woods and try and find someone and get herself into a bad spot. So that was helpful for her.
Yeah, that's a great trait too. Awesome. All right, no questions from our watchers yet, so I'll give you another one. This is a good one because a lot of your readings had a really good sense of setting. So setting often plays a role in creating suspense. How do you use the environment to enhance the atmosphere of your story? And I think a lot of your readings were kind of examples of that. So talk us through that and your intentionality in doing that. And we'll start with you, Bailey.
Yeah, I mean, Alaska's an obvious. You want to make something kind of scary and foreboding. Beautiful it is as it is. Alaska in winter is great because anytime you have a character outside, there's an element of danger and things that could go wrong between, freezing to death and wildlife and this mountainous kind of terrain where people fall and things like that. It was an easy one.
Yeah. Yeah. And the isolation of it too, I think, setting could
Well,
create.
yeah. And one of the things that I talk about in that book is the fact that each state trooper in Alaska covers an area the size of my home state, Maryland, or, like they cover these massive swaths of land. And so that can get you into very precarious situations if you're not careful.
For sure. Mary, how about you? How do you use setting to create suspense?
Well, a lot of the story takes place, or a fair amount of it takes place at the police station. Some of it in Sid's apartment, which is neither scary nor, well, it's kind of neutral. Some of the story, a lot of the story takes place in the park that she and Gail used to meet in frequently. And of course, their very first meeting in that park happens to be at night, so it's a little scary there. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, the one really safe and wonderful place is when Gail has Sid over to dinner, and her townhouse is downtown in Greenwich Village, and it's just like a little Eden in the middle of New York. So I try to balance it out that way.
Yeah. And New York as a place itself has its own kind of personality, and reputation too, when it comes to, crime and whatnot too. So I think that's all inherent in the work as well.
Yeah.
MJ, how about you? How do you use setting? Tell us about the lighthouse.
So Tampa is a very haunted city. It's known for being haunted. And some of Aunt Marjorie's friends worked in Ybor City, which used to be cigar factories. And a lot of people died in those factories. So it's supposed to be very, very haunted. So Tampa seemed like a natural place to put the story, and the lighthouse. I just always thought a haunted lighthouse would be great because the ghosts like Syl would go up to the top of the lighthouse to look out, and it would be really, really cold, even with all the glass windows in the middle of summer. And that's how the ghost would make her presence known to her. So Tampa is just a really haunted place, and the lighthouse just seemed natural.
Yeah, awesome. Sheri.
So for me, it's I'm using the landscape here because it's a very, very beautiful place here with a lot of mountains, a lot of forests and everything. But in my experience as a canine handler, there are things out there that you wouldn't expect to find, and some of them are rather frightening. And so I try to blend the beauty with the frightening aspects that could be going on to set up that tension.
Yeah. The juxtaposition of those too, I think is interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
And Kelly, how about you? I think your reading had like such a significant setting as well.
Yeah, the and the larger, aspect of the story, it's the natural world is really important, but also the historical place. So it's a place with an old set, with an old history, also a lot of ghosts, and a ghost, is an important character in the story as well. And the ghost really actually propels some of the action. So in a general sense, one of the things about the setting is there's this tension between what you think you know and then what you realize you don't know, and that's about the part of it's about the landscape, that there's this beautiful landscape with all these wonderful things in it, but there's something really bad, happening that's not easy to see. And you also think, what's, material and real in terms of, our, present reality. And then you find out that, things like ghosts are also real. So those things are kind of, they're destabilizing, and causes characters to rethink a lot of things.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely would be rethinking a lot of things in that situation for sure. Sadly, we are out of time. But thank you to all our amazing authors for being here, and to everyone who came to watch. We love you and appreciate you. Please do hang around for our next session, which is, let me find my schedule. We're having a panel, Too Good to Be True, Blending Fact and Fiction. That's coming up in just about 5 minutes, so please do stay for that. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.